Hi, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to this event, Nari Shakti, a discussion on women's power in India, brought to you by Hindus for Human Rights. This event is part of the NGO parallel event schedule for the Commission on the Status of Women. We're so glad to be part of an amazing schedule of events during this important convening of people across the world invested in the advancement of women. I'm Ria Chakraborty, the Senior Policy Director at Hindus for Human Rights. As you may know, Hindus for Human Rights provides a Hindu voice in support of human rights across the world, especially in defense of human rights in South Asia. Our work is rooted in the values of peace, truth, and justice as we fight for a more equitable and just society. Today, we are holding a conversation on how women's political power affects women's rights in India. We will discuss if increased women's political participation can help India meaningfully address the challenges that women face, particularly pervasive gender based violence, especially against women from caste oppressed and minority backgrounds. We want to explore how women's political participation across caste and faith changes how governments treat women. Finally, we will discuss legal, cultural, and political solutions to address gender based violence and bodily autonomy for women and gender minorities in India. Indian women face significant challenges as well as unprecedented opportunities. The ruling government, led by Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party, has bragged about its achievements to secure women's economic and social opportunities. But behind the stories of increased employment for women, there lies a darker truth. The BJP and the Hindu nationalist ideology it embraces have long fought against women's rights. Hindu nationalism is an ideology grounded in misogyny, and particularly violence against minority and caste oppressed women. It draws on casteist and patriarchal interpretations of Hinduism to justify its supremacism in society and in politics. At the same time, women are becoming an important voting bloc with visible gains and economic opportunities. In the last national elections, all the major parties made a concerted effort to reach out to women voters. Although women continue to be severely underrepresented in politics, women are prominent across political parties, and one of the largest states in India is led by a woman. Last year, Parliament passed a bill to reserve one-third of all parliamentary seats for women. Um, Despite the political gains, women's equality is yet to be fully realized. Gender based violence, in particular, continues to be a pervasive phenomenon for women across India. Of August of last year, the case of a doctor who was brutally assaulted and murdered in Kolkata shocked Indians and mobilized people across the region to protest against the ongoing scourge of gender based violence. But the case also raised questions about why other cases of gender based violence against Dalit, Adivasi, and other minority women didn't garner the same level of outrage across India. We will dive into all of these issues and more over the next hour and a half. But first, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Kavita Srivastava is a Jaipur-based feminist and human rights movement leader. She is currently the president of the People's Union for Civil Liberties, the biggest human rights organization in India. She has been part of movements to secure Indians' rights to access information about their government and the right to food security. She led the Justice for Bhanwari Devi movement to protest gender-based violence in India. Her work on getting prisoners released on both sides of the border between India and Pakistan took her several times to Pakistan. And Kavita was part of the group that pushed the Supreme Court of India to formulate the Vishaka Guidelines, which established standards for protecting women from workplace sexual harassment. Our other panelist is Afreen Fatima. Afreen is one of the many courageous Indian Muslim students who led protests against the Islamophobic Citizenship Amendment Act in 2019. She is the national secretary of the fraternity movement and was also president of the Women's College Students Union at Aligarh Muslim University. She has spoken out fearlessly against anti-Muslim sentiments and actions by the Indian government amid increasing repression and harassment, not just by the BJP, but its online supporters. Afreen and her family have been leaders in the fight against Islamophobia in India and have even faced severe consequences for their work. Currently, Afreen is a researcher at the Polis Project, which does extensive research and reporting on human rights in India. So I'm so glad to be joined by both of you today. It's truly an honor, and I'm so excited for everyone to hear all of your thoughts on the state of women in India today. And as a note to all of our attendees, please use the question and answer function to ask questions, and we'll have some time at the end for all of you for us to answer those questions. But first, Kavitha, I'd like to turn to you and ask you if you can give us an overview of the state of women's rights in India today, and particularly how India's laws have historically advanced and or harmed women's advancement.
So let me tell you that things in India regarding women's rights, it's actually on a backslide. There is a backlash where the rights that we struggled for over 60, 70 years are now being actually taken away. And it's a very sad case of what India is becoming, and how actually, on the one hand, it appears, gender just, gender equal, it may appear. But actually, if you really get into the heart of the matter, through the judiciary, actually now, and through the parliament, this backlash has started. And it's very depressing because, I mean, if you just go one by one, what's happening. So I think we struggled for our sexual autonomy. We struggled for our choices, and we struggled against family, and we struggled against the larger social structures and the state. Now, increasingly, state wants to regulate our bodies. State wants to take control over our lives. So I just want to give a very, very small example to start with. We have an Article 44, which was supposed to bring in an egalitarian, personal codes, to put together all the personal codes and bring a uniform civil code. Now, that was a vision of the constitution makers, but it didn't happen at the time of when the constitution was made. It was put as Article 44, but it did not get implemented. It did not get implemented because there was a bloody partition and there were lots and lots of problems. So people thought, let's postpone it. And later, the women's movement took it up. In the 80s, very actively we raised. I mean, I have a complete sort of memory of it, The socialist women's movement came up with one draft, and other movements came up with another draft. And suddenly, with the rising BJP in 89, we saw what was hijacked. Not just our slogans, our posters, UCC will be brought in, was, a major agenda of the BJP. So in a successive Indian Association of Women's Studies Conference and Women's Movement Conference, we just shelved this idea of a uniform civil code. And, we just pushed it. And we said, because now whatever is going to come is going to be a Hinduized uniform civil code. And we know the last 35 years, what we have seen, just right from the from 1990 onwards, you've had the rise of the Hindutva, the Hindu Rashtra today. They haven't formally stated we are an Hindu Rashtra, but let's acknowledge we are in a Hindu Rashtra. And so we had shelved this entire idea, and we said this is not an opportune time. And for 30 years, we never saw it. But now it is brought out in the name of gender equality, in the name of trying to make Muslim and Hindu women equal, and not how, they will not talk of how equal through this you actually become gender equal. No. In the name of trying to bring all Muslim women, because Hindu women have better rights according to them, so to bring them equal, they try to, and they've experimented it in one state. It's a disaster. the first thing that they take away, I mean, it's actually ridiculous also. Extensively, you can see what the situation is. The whole live in relationship, for instance, like openly lived in. I mean, I was in that period of the feminist struggle when I could live without marriage. And for 22 years, I lived with my partner. We lived together, and we didn't have to go and register and nothing. That was our personal choice. We are protected. The right to privacy is even now being laid down by the Supreme Court. But now the government wants to control uh, you know, this entire autonomy of ours, our sexual autonomy. They want to control it, and now they want us to, make declare publicly this intimate relationship of ours to authorities, and I mean, it's completely unconstitutional. This is something that is catching on. All BJP states are now, and not just BJP states, different high courts are now giving judgments that, what we need to do is we need to regulate these living relationships, because the woman has a very bad time when the man leaves. The woman has a very bad time. In that name, I think we have to understand that the state now wants to control our choices, wants to control our bodies, wants to control our autonomy. So the Indian state, the patriarchal Indian state, is actually strengthening itself in the name of protection of women. It's actually going to be disempowering women much more. This is only one example. There are many, many, many such examples. For instance, of late, there is a discourse on the one hand, I mean, child marriage. Let's talk of child marriage. Now they're saying, first they said, and there was a whole report that of a standing committee of parliament, that 21 should become the age of marriage for girls. So we said this is raising the bar too high, because you've criminalized the age of consent has been raised from 16 to 18. So you criminalize all choices that 16 to 18-year-olds make, as far as body explorations and their sexual autonomy is concerned. They can't, because it gets criminalized. Any such act gets criminalized. Now they want to raise the age to 21. We said, no, this is wrong. You should bring down the age of consent and keep the age of marriage 18 for girls, and bring down the age of consent for men. Actually, the age of marriage of men is 21. Bring it down to 18. What they're doing? On the one hand, this report says 21, which will really, really actually end up with a lot of criminalization, because unnecessarily these relationships will be of certain choices. I mean, I must have the choice to marry when I want to. And raising this bar to 21 is just absolutely incorrect. At the same time, there's a whole discourse that let communities have the autonomy to decide the age of marriage. So you're doing both things. You're playing with both things. On the one hand, you play up this whole community identity as part of the Hindutva project. You do want to control women, because the RSS chief is frequently heard saying that Hindu women must now have at least 3 children, because the norm has increasingly become 2 children. They must have at least 3 children, especially those educated and intelligent households, they must have at least 3 children. So, in every sense, this liberation that each one of us in the movement had the choice to marry or not marry, to live with somebody or not live with somebody, or even self determine our gender. We could be LGBTQIA plus, we could be any identity. In the Uttarakhand bill, it's completely silent on this. So actually, a mess is going to happen in our personal lives. And I always feel that when women are liberated from their personal spaces from their personal situation. Of course, it's a continuous process between the personal and the political, and the personal is the political, and the political is the personal. But if I'm going to be struggling with my autonomy, my choices, my bodily autonomy, I mean, I cannot tell you what they've done with the reproductive rights bill, just to help commerce. Women's bodies are now going to become great subjects, great objects to earn money from. And I mean, I could just go on and on regarding the backlash that is coming ultimately through the courts. I mean, the one of the worst kind of things is the myth. They're now trying to say that the domestic violence criminal cases is under a law called 498A, which very clearly states the purpose of what this law was, to prevent cruelty, uh, through husband and relatives. And now with all these some situations, maybe, women were blackmailing men, maybe women were torturing men, and men have committed suicide. I mean, that should be investigated, definitely. If there is an abetment to suicide or whatever, it should be investigated. But that doesn't then end up that actually women lie about domestic violence. In just since in the last 4 months, we're trying to collect data, the number of cases that the police is just closing. This is false. This is, lies. The women are liars. Coming back to this premise that women are liars. Something that took us such a long time to struggle and come out of it. That we don't lie when there is rape. We don't lie when there is when there is violence and there's cruelty in the family. There is domestic violence. It took us, till the 80s, there was not even a recognition. It was called family violence. Domestic violence comes in so much later, and the civil law only came in 2005. It took us, it's only 20 years old, the civil law on domestic violence. It's something that we've had to struggle with. But now this thing that, women lie. So a kind of, the women's movement has basically done two things. Number one, it through lawmaking, it has asserted its rights. There was an idea of a right, or it was already enshrined in the constitution or in international law. For instance, sexual harassment at workplace, we got it through CEDAW. It's India's commitment through CEDAW that we got the sexual harassment of women at workplace, and that was through the Vishaka judgment. And you will not believe it, that just just the attempt to fail this law and its implementation. So the Indian women's movement struggled. I'm only giving you one section of our work. Struggled very hard in lawmaking, uh, and trying to ensure that some sort of equality happened. But now the time has come to reverse it. I'm not even taking up what they're doing to Muslim women, because I know Afreen is going to do it. But it's so, in the name of gender justice, they're doing so much of injustice to minorities, women, because the project is Hindutva. And Hindutva, women cannot be equal to men. Women cannot have their choices. So that backlash, that backslide, including the media. Every day the media sing, and this in the name of love jihad, in the name of which I'm sure Afreen is going to talk, but young girls just cannot have the choice of marriage also. Okay, I want to marry, I don't want to live in. I want to marry, but let me marry somebody of my choice. And it's the Dalit and the Muslim men. You see, it's actually a lot of the recent work is a lot of targeting of Muslim men, which I'm sure will be explained much more. It's the targeting of Muslim men. It's right from the beginning. Kya Hindu na mard hai? Is the Hindu impotent? क्या हिंदू ना मर्द है? It is this mentality that actually determines in a basic way the Hindu project and the way they determine women. There are many. I haven't talked to you about working class women. I've only given the broad idea of how how Article 19, these are part of our freedom of expression, of our association. These are particular freedoms given to us. That is being completely demolished. Read with all the others. I'm sure we're going to get another chance where I can take you through the backlash that's happening in the other sections of the movie.
Thank you, Kavita. That's a wonderful overview, I think, of where things stand. And Fatima is, or sorry, Afreen, I keep calling you Fatima. I'm so sorry. Um, Afreen, as Kavita mentioned, there is like a particular effect that has happened for Muslim women, especially under this government. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what is it like for Muslim women today? Oftentimes you hear that there are these att- oftentimes you hear that the attempts to control Muslim women are kind of marketed by the Hindu nationalists as trying to bring gender justice, but that's often not the case. So I hope that you can tell us a little bit more about what Muslim women in particular are facing.
Yeah, sure. Am I audible fine? Okay. You can call me Fatima for that matter. It's all right. Um, I think I think Muslim women in India are at a intersection of multiple forms of oppression, uh, gendered oppression, Islamophobia, there's state violence, and there's a systemic socio-economic exclusion of Muslim women. The right wing openly weaponizes Islamophobia against us. And So Muslim women are portrayed either as passive victims of an inherently oppressive faith or as threats to the nation for just simply asserting their identity. But the problem extends beyond the right. I feel that even the left liberal and secular spaces, within the left liberals and secular spaces, there is a deeply ingrained Islamophobia that denies Muslim women their agency. And unless they conform to this pre approved, secularized model of emancipation or what emancipation looks like. I think the past decade has seen a direct state backed attack on Muslim women, be it through the criminalization of practices such as triple talaq, be it hijab bans in educational institutions or the rise of digital hate campaigns, where I mean, there have been instances where Muslim women have been auctioned online, sold off online. Recently, the Quint came up with a report that showed how there's a fetishization of sexually violating Muslim women. And it's happening all over social media by Hindu men, and no one talks about it. But beyond these violations, Muslim women also face a systemic erasure where we're excluded from policy conversations, we're excluded from economic opportunities, and even from feminist discourses for that matter, that should have been our natural allies. The struggle today is not just against Hindutva. As a Muslim woman, I also feel it's against those who claim to stand for progressive politics, but continue to reinforce harmful tropes about Muslim women.
Yeah, that's really, a good reminder, I think, of what solidarity should actually look like. And again, very grateful for your comments. Um, so both of you have talked a little bit about this, but one of the enduring myths, at least in the West, has been that Narendra Modi has overseen this like historic expansion of women's rights. I've heard personally from people that, we're concerned about the human rights issues in India, but you can't literally, someone said, his human rights record is not good, but you can't deny that women have advanced under Modi. And I want to dig into this like sentiment, like what is it that makes people think this, and what is the reality, I think, of what this government in particular has done for women. A lot of damage has been done, I think, and so I think it's worth kind of emphasizing, why does this contradiction endure between what I think Indian women feel and what is being projected in the West? Either of you
You
can
want to go
start.
first, Afri?
Sure. I think Modi is a great salesman. Uh, so, uh, Modi's so-called expansion of women's empowerment is nothing more than a propaganda. It's a very carefully curated narrative for the global audiences. I mean, we see how he presents himself in programs like Howdy Modi, and all those things. So, what is very important is that people in the West, they don't just believe what they hear. They should actually listen to women from India speak and take our words for it, right? So the reality on the ground, I mean, it's a very different story. Uh, the Modi government has used women's right very selectively, and especially when it comes to Muslim women. So in invoking them when it's politically convenient, while enabling some of the most violent forms of gender-based oppression. We've seen the kind of gendered violence happened in Gujarat, uh, and continues to happen to this day. One may call them isolated, but I feel that they're all connected to the larger picture of Hindutva. So the BJP coming to Muslim women, the BJP claims to rescue Muslim women from triple talaq and then criminalizes triple talaq. Uh, it also has orchestrated some of the most vicious attacks on Muslim, Dalit, and Adivasi women. Uh, the Hathras case is a massive example. So, from the uh, okay, so the lynching of Bilkis Banu's family, and then the release of her rapists, to hijab ban in Karnataka, to forcing young women out of education, to online sexualization, fetishization, semi-pornographic images of Muslim women. The list is endless. The BJP-led state governments, under the BJP-led state governments, women's safety has actually worsened. In Uttar Pradesh, for example, the so-called these anti-Romeo squads were positions as measures for women's safety, but instead they're just tools for moral policing, and disproportionately targeting uh, interfaith and Dalit relationships. So in Gujarat, the state has, like I mentioned, the release of Bilkis Banu's rapists. Uh, Cases of gender-based violences are among the highest in countries, and yet the perpetrators of violence against women, especially Muslim women, are rewarded with political power. So Hindutva's governance is not about women's right. It is anything but that. It is just simply about control. And the moment women, especially Muslim women, assert their rights outside the framework dictated by Hindutva, they become targets of state repression.
Yeah. Kavita, did you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, see, I just think that I would like to talk from two, three other, just adding on, fully agreeing with Afreen. She's put it very well. Adding on to a few other elements in his so-called Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's the big slogan, that you save the daughter and teach the daughter. I mean, as just part of that. So let's begin with the Beti when she's born, I want to look at the maternal. We really fought for maternity entitlements for women, for working class women, you know, all poor women who get rations, are working class women and need to be protected during maternity, because women like us, middle class women like us, wherever we are employed, get maternity leave and full paid maternity leave. That's very much a part of the Indian constitution. It's in the constitution that maternal rights will be protected. Now, I mean, you will not believe it that the Modi government has even reduced what was written in the law. In the law, we somehow got it in 2013 that 6,000 rupees should be paid to a woman, maternity entitlement. We know it's nothing, but at least she won't get up the next day and go for work. At least that'll be enough for her to feed herself and give nutrition to a child, because the first 6 months, I mean, we've had this terrible issue of child mortality and look, just malnutrition. I mean, just children's malnutrition it's still so high. I mean, we still are like worse than sub-Saharan Africa in many ways. Now, so what about this maternal social security? It was meant to be 6,000. They reduced it to 5,000. And we petition, we are in the Supreme Court. Look at the court now. The court which earlier gave us a lot of rights of this nature. Through the courts we got these rights, and then we would get the government to legislate. It's a case which is still pending since the last 10 years. It's just not moving. And the government in 10 years continues to give 5,000. And then they say, they come up with some weird plan that we will increase it by 500 rupees if there is a girl that's born, or something ridiculous like that. Now, I mean, if you're really concerned about the woman, you're really concerned about the Beti, you would ensure her entire life cycle is strengthened, and the social production work of bearing children is protected. So the so-called motherhood that they want women to be in motherhood, and they want to perpetuate caste and all. Even in this framework of motherhood, they're actually not doing much. Forget that pensions have just not increased. I mean, what is the central government's contribution for pensions? 200 rupees. It's the state governments who may give you something. I mean, if you really were worried for single women and you wanted to give you, okay, you say, okay, we don't care about old men. We will not bother about old men. But single women, they are young, they're very young, to older women, we will protect you, with a certain pension. What is your contribution? It's 200. It's the state governments who add. The state IM, it's 1,000 now. Our state is adding. So, I mean, if you come to the cutting edge, there is actually nothing much that, I mean, what is it that you've done for migrant women? And COVID exposed this. I mean, it shook us, COVID, when we saw we have 12 crore people who undergo circular migration in India. When we saw lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of people marching through the highways. Okay, so it's after we pushed in the Supreme Court, they set up a portal and they said, okay, register all migrants, because the government brazenly said we have no data on migrants. But what about, so now some sort of something has started, but it's so completely gender blind. There's nothing about women that they bring in. And you look at women's work participation, it's continuously declining. Let's look at women's work participation in these last 10 years and see it see it at multiple levels. Women in agriculture, women in forestry. Let's see in those. Let's see labor, what's happening to women who are only using their labor. Our work participation is declining. So I just feel that if you really get into structural issues, uh, um, Afrin has very clearly told us that the very solidly, gendered questions she has addressed, and addressed it very well, looking at minority women. If minority women are not, uh, you know, are not being treated equally, or are being forced, or in a very protective way, if they're being treated, I don't think other women can have a better fate. It's the same attitude, it's the same approach. Similarly, there's blindness. Now they've said that this sort of, now suddenly the scheme is to transfer money. Let's do income support. Income support will be something that will go into the woman's bank. So somebody says 1,500, another person says 2,000, another party, one party said 1,500, another party 2,000, another party 2,500. But here you are not doing that. That money that's going to come to the women is for them to use for their, for their choice or their benefit. It's just treating them as mere votes. You've reduced them to vote. You want to bribe, you want to incentive, trying to do an incentive. And we very well know it, that if with income support, you don't have a certain plan in mind, because wages and prices move together. You're doing nothing about the wages. Even today, the national floor wage, MG and REJ has 70 to 80% women. What are the women getting? I mean, in my state, Rajasthan, women are getting less than 300. I mean, that's our maximum wage, which is the minimum wage, is the maximum wage per day. And the work is just 100 days. So let me tell you, structural issues have not been touched, because actually, women's empowerment is not an agenda. It's actually looking at women as mere voters, or objectifying women further, like their bodies, or regulating women. That is the agenda. It's very, very, within the Hindutva framework, the patriarchal strengthening of patriarchy in this way. It's on women's bodies. It's actually, the Hindutva state is on women's bodies.
Yeah, so both of you, this is a good deepening, I think, of understanding what this looks like. Afreen, you also mentioned, part of the problem, yes, is the right wing and its misogyny and patriarchy, and especially its effects on minority women. But you also said, that this Islamophobia and the treatment of Muslim women is something that is not just confined to one part of the political spectrum. It is across the political spectrum. And I'll start with you, and then Kavita, please feel free to add additional comments. Like, what is it about Indian society that particularly marginalizes minority women, Muslim women, but also, Dalit and Adivasi women, and kind of creates costs, or at least stops women who would otherwise identify as being secular or on the left from building real solidarity with other women who are facing multiple kinds of oppression.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo what Kavita ji said in the end, that Hindutva is on the bodies of women, and women bodies are battlegrounds. When it comes to women from marginalized communities, from Muslim women, Christian women, the kind of violence, Dalit and Adivasi women, the kind of violence that we face is uh, the intersectionality of the violence is something that is generally not addressed. So, for example, when an app or a website sells off an image of me, uh, as in Hindu men go on that website and auction off my image, my photo, all of a sudden, what happened was that it was, oh, women are being targeted, but one has to sort of acknowledge that Muslim women were targeted. So, when talking about women violence on women's bodies, one has to acknowledge the intersectional identity of that woman. One has to acknowledge that she's a Dalit woman or an Adivasi woman or a Muslim woman or a Christian woman. If you just put out a blanket term like, okay, women are being oppressed and this kind of violence are happening against women, it does not sort of help women from these marginalized communities to sort of uh, find their way across this violence that is being done on their bodies. And I think Hindutva's four-founders as well have been very they've openly talked about using rape as a method of subjugating Muslims, as a tool to sort of gain control. So one has to sort of understand that Hindutva uh, is especially violent against Muslim women and Christian women and women from marginalized communities, because this is the best way to sort of control a community. One has to understand why this kind of violence happens so often. It is to sort of put the men of the community in check, that if you do not, if you go way out of the way, we will do the kind of violence that we're already doing to you, but also to your women. And I think it's it's because I mean, just one sentence, that women's bodies are being just treated as battlegrounds to sort of bring in uh, to sort of subjugate the entire community, the entire in our case the entire Muslim population. And it just reinforces s- reinforces the already tropes that I talked about. So it would either have that Muslim women should be inside the house at one point. On one end, the BJP says that we want to empower Muslim women, but at the same time, their policies, the way they're working, ensures that Muslim women stay at home. I mean, why would you ban hijab if you want Muslim women out, right? Um, and it just leaves very little scope for Muslim women to sort of navigate their way forward, and to sort of brave all the violence that is happening and then also be out there. And so I think the Shaheen Bagh movement was one such example where Muslim women were out on the streets protesting, but at the same time, they were being criminalized for protesting, for asserting their identity as Muslims. And one has to understand how the state, the Hindutva state, this Hindutva state has sort of made it very easy for Muslim women to also be criminalized now. We saw it in Safura Zargar's arrest. We're seeing it over and over again, how it's very easy to normalize violence to create consent for violence against Muslim women, and no one would bat an eye.
So I'm going to respond to it in my own way. See, I think you have to realize, as far as violence is concerned, as a women's activist who's worked for the last 40 years on gender-based violence, since I was all of less than 20, I started work. Let me tell you the kind of impunity that we are observing, of as far as the accused are concerned, is crazy. I mean, the kind of protection that the police, they come with this thing that we are going to be a non-corrupt government. Governance is something that we know very well. That's the kind of discourse that they try to run about themselves. But let me tell you, it's it's so difficult, even simple rape cases, domestic violence cases. We're just unable to get relief uh, either through the executive or the judiciary. Simple cases. And it's so very, very disturbing to see this reversal happening. After all, we had, through our feminist praxis, uh, created that kind of engagement with the criminal justice system where accountability was sought from the police for all women, for Dalit women, for Adivasi women, for minorities women, and other women. We sought it for all. In fact, we would always, in our movement, try to do it better and better for sex workers, for the LGBTQI plus community. But at this point of time, I mean, I don't want to sound that I'm just being anti, but it is the truth. The levels of impunity are so high. There was always some sort of protection given to some. I mean, look at Manipur. Or look at Chhattisgarh. Militarization totally in the hands of the state. And what do they do to women? Kashmir. Manipur, brazenly, I mean, the government refuses to do anything, and then brazenly, this kind of video gets leaked just before the parliament. And these two women who are stripped, and what happens to them? And then the Supreme Court comes in. The government, the central government, when the parliament was stopped and the prime minister was forced to reply, he just dealt with Manipur in 2 minutes, and the rest of the time was spent in praising his government's work and nothing to really address about those women. The Supreme Court set up a committee. Yes, they did look into it, but not the larger question of what was happening. So, if there is militarization, if vigilantes of any community out on the roads, who does it affect? It affects women most, because women are told, you go into the house. And Manipur stands out as an example of how vigilantism was allowed to grow and weapons are provided to them, armed groups. And whom were they protecting? They were protecting us, women and everybody. So, I mean, if this is what your governance is, this is how you treat, you allow a situation to be militarized, you allow ethnicity to dominate and a conflict to continue, and you allow, women's bodies, contestation of any kind of supremacy, race supremacy, ethnic supremacy, is caste supremacy, is on women's bodies. It's a continuum of the patriarchal state. This has been very, very shocking. And similarly in Bastar and Kashmir and in other parts. So I just feel that why are these stories not told? Why are these stories not communicated? Why is it that only some of the very rosy picture? Because you even hijack the complete media. You're not letting exploration, letting people know for themselves and deciding. Let all sides of, let all the facts come on the table and then let people decide. There's a complete denial of facts. My right to know is completely denied. We led such a big movement from central Rajasthan of the right to information. We were the pioneers of the right to information movement, collectively with few others, and farmers and workers of central Rajasthan. And it was our right to know, which is enshrined in the Indian Constitution. And today I don't have the right to know. Today only a narrative is presented to me. So how will actually people struggle to even know? Yes, they can actually go into social media. Now, Social media, you're criminalized. On the social media, if you criticize the government, how can your feminist understanding, or what you want to say, the truth about what's happening to women or trans people or any of them, how can you show that? If our democratic spaces are over, please realize democratic spaces have shrunk. You can't, women's research, feminist research has actually gone for a toss because funding has been stopped because of the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act being made so stringent, and more than 40 to 45,000 organizations who have been now blacklisted and cannot get an FCRA. So feminist research also cannot happen. You cannot, where is the corporate funding? That's just 1% of the total funding that came into the NGO sector. You have completely attacked the NGO sector. And this whole thing about Panchayati Raj having given, you also started, that doesn't get implemented till 2029 or 30 or 31 after delimitation. 2027 is the delimitation of our constituencies, of our parliamentary constituencies, where they will be redrawn. After that, they will implement. So what was it? It was just, it's not even a paper tiger because it really actually doesn't exist. So I'm sorry to say, as somebody whose life was the movement, I used to always say, I'm the women's movement when I was growing up in my 20s, in my 30s. And there's been an attack on our, I mean, we women only move with our cultural expressions, our songs, our poetry. How many women have cases against them because of being bold? And all kinds of people have it, even humorists have it, and others have it. But a lot of women have it, a lot of feminists have it, and a lot of other women who are trying to challenge the government, not necessarily in a feminist way. So I'm not sure. I think with shrinking spaces of democracy, intersectionality, which is our point of action, ceases to exist, if there is impunity, if there is the culture of violence that is promoted, then what will the criminal justice system do? What will the judiciary do? I mean, let's not even talk about representation of women in the judiciary, etc. Let's even not even talk about that. I mean, that's totally a male bastion, continues to be.
No, this is so useful to think about. And one thing I was going to ask, but then you basically answered it, was about women's representation in politics. Before I continue, I would just say that Afreen had to drop. She is a young mother, so as always, women's work is also in the home and in the actual work, and so as a good illustration of those tensions in women's lives, we Afreen had to drop, but we are so glad she was able to
She's now going
join
to
us.
rejoin.
She may rejoin. It
Yeah.
depends on her child. So, but what I wanted to ask or wanted to touch on a little bit is women's representation in politics. I think sometimes we hear that, like, if you have more women in politics, it can change the laws or change the way women are treated in policy making. And this is something I have argued before, but to me, a great contradiction of that was actually what happened in August in West Bengal, where there was this case of a woman who was brutally murdered and assaulted. And, like until that point, this is an opposition-led state where the party, the Trinamool Congress, has said very proudly that they're a woman-led party, a woman-led state, and yet some of the same pitfalls around impunity and transparency around this case were there. And I know PUCL also had a comment about a law that was introduced in West Bengal around introducing the death penalty for gender-based violence. So I want to kind of complicate this picture a little bit of
Yeah.
having more women in politics and whether or not that actually
Yeah.
does materially help women.
So I think your question is in three parts. I'll take each of it.
Yeah.
Number one, I think visibilizing is very important. yes, ideology is extremely important, You could have all these women with totally patriarchal mindsets. For instance, we've had the Smriti Iranis and the Nirmala Sitharaman. Nirmala Sitharaman straightforward said that, oh, this feminism is a Western idea, and what is this patriarchy? That has never existed in India. She said it to a group of students, shamelessly. And we know what Smriti Irani said about various rape cases. She was literally blaming the girls. So it's while ideology is very important, I'll come to it later, but women's percentage in electoral representation uh, has to increase. Our Look at the wonders of women in the third tier of governance. Everywhere it started with 33% reservation, and very soon it became 33% reservation, was very soon crossed, and it was 35%, 40% women coming in the third tier, the panchayat tier. And then several governments like the state I am in made it 50%, and there were 55% women coming in. Now, this is really the ground where you're preparing politicians, where women are learning to govern, women are learning to listen to the people, women are learning about policy and policy making, women are learning about planning. But how do they rise to the higher levels? There's just no way that they can rise, because there is an embargo if they want to become legislators. Earlier, it used to be a story that I've also written, from sarpanch to member of parliament and minister, but now it's so difficult, to actually, I mean, the percentage of women has always been below 14%. We have oscillated between 10% and 14%, and that is what it stands even now. So, where do all these, where does the aspiration of women go? Because we know that men will just not allow you into those spaces. Uh, Secondly, so visibilization of, I mean, where the Dalit women, I mean, we are very clear that privileged women like me can definitely voice a concern of what's happening to Dalits and Adivasis, can express our concerns, but can express their concerns also. However, which day will they be given the platform to express their concern? It took PUCL almost 50 years to make a woman president. Which day will an Adivasi woman become president of the PUCL? We never asked for reservation, but we know that even a human rights organization like mine, which is so progressive, so powerful, it took them like several years, to almost 50, I mean 45 years to make a woman president. What is this? This is it's so deep rooted. So I'm very clear that if there is no reservation, women will just not increase, and the aspirations of all the women who are learning up such good practices in governance and planning and policy and implementation will never get space. Secondly, you've killed student elections, you've killed student bodies, you've killed democracy in universities. So from where will, women, young women, you want youth, but where will they come from? Look at next door. Who led the whole struggle in Bangladesh? To students. It was a lot of women and men. And some of them are now sitting in ministerial berths, whatever the ad hoc government is doing, the interim government is doing. Many of them are sitting there. You just don't allow it. I mean, even Mr. Arun Jaitley, he was ABVP leader. And from there, he rose to become, a finance minister. So, I mean, you have destroyed the very ground from where good politics and politicians, rise. So, as far as um, politics, and men will still get a straightforward chance. What about women? So if they go through that rotten colleges and universities. So let me tell you, increasingly privatization in education, higher education, they don't even have committees, leave alone elections. They don't even have student council, some sort of a committee. They may just have a nominated committee. So actually, processes of reduction in democracy actually will affect women's participation, political participation. And political participation for what? So now this is my last part, that if for me as a lay woman, water is the priority. I need a platform to make my government accountable. I need the right to know, and I need a platform to make it accountable. If you finish processes in parliament, today the parliament just doesn't function. So democratic institutions are very, very important for political participation of women. And if you don't do it, I mean, I am politically participating even when I'm filing an RTI. I am politically participating when I raise a question of what happened, why am the accused being arrested. And when I question my sarpanch or my MLA, what have you done with this money? What have you done with the MLA fund? You know, it's a very important political question. Now you're not allowed these questions. Where are those platforms? Because democracies you can't sit on dharna. You know, you sit on dharna and make a demand that that money was supposed to go for the promotion of my school from an upper primary school to a secondary or higher secondary school. You can't. There's no, in the city I come from, there's no space to sit. Our right to protest has really shrunk. So political participation is right from participatory democracy to electoral democracy. And I think to accountability of these institutions, and all this is being reduced. So nevertheless, I mean, in spite of whatever little space we have to resist. I mean, there's no way out. There's just no way out. We have to resist whatever little space. That's what I say. That protect. I mean, and don't have this bravado and then end up in jail and you'll never come out. But use whatever little space, whether it is social media till you have it, your roadside till you have it, whatever. Use it to raise these questions, because the more authoritarian the center becomes, the opposition will continuously fragment. So people have to be the opposition. We have to be the opposition. We are seeing the state of the opposition. And can we see a challenge to all this, to this completely diminishing democracy, or resurrection of patriarchy, or some sort of a dismantling of all democratic institutions? Can we see it without the participation of women? No. Adivasi women are fighting when they are trying to save the forest. It's not just saving the forest for themselves. They're actually saving the forest for this world, for this globe. They're in the process of the climate change. They need democracy for raising those kinds of rights. Similarly, when Dalit women demand livelihoods, it's that livelihood is not just for themselves. They are into public works. So I just feel, I mean, into some social good, those kinds of political participation. If I have to get my wage increased as a domestic worker, I'm not allowed to do a dharna. I'm not allowed to go and protest outside the person's house who denied me wages. The police will come and, march me out of there. So, but we have to resist, we have to fight. We've really got to struggle. The struggle and the responsibility on women has gone up many, many fold, because we cannot just sit back. The women, the 15 women who made the Constitution of India, they did some excellent work and showed the women's perspective. In fact, you have in the first tenet of the human right, all humans are born free. That was also an Indian woman giving that input. Others, all men are born free. So I just feel that women cannot slide back, however the backlash be. We've got to keep engaging and keep coming out.
Thank you so much for this call to action. We have a few questions from the audience as well. So Annapurna asked, how are transgender rights in India? How have they been affected by the present political climate? Are there any specific examples? Um, Obviously, in the US, this has been a huge controversy right now, but at the same
Okay.
time, in India, there's been a push and pull. So,
So, I mean, see it in two ways. One is that the Supreme Court judgment that came for self-determination, I think it was 2014 or 15, the law that happened in 2020, that 2019 ran it down. That right of self-determination was handed over to medical specialists and psychologists and all kinds of nonsense, you know. So and similarly, many such things. I mean, of course, a major struggle to recognize trans people and to ensure that they have that kind of space happened over the years. But when we were about to move a step forward, where self-determination should have been at the core of the lawmaking, it it slid back because they're doubting you. Why do you want a doctor, clinician, or a psychologist to be finally doing the signature on who you are? I have a right to decide who I am. I want to be queer. I have that right. So that space has been majorly lost, and it's a very big loss because in our understanding and discourse. And secondly, same-sex marriage. When the Supreme Court, why did that kind of a judgment come of the Supreme Court? Because the larger political understanding was against it. And the Supreme Court sort of decided to comply by it. So same-sex marriages has not come in India. Now that's also a very, very big setback. I mean, it's so much to do with apart from the fact that what happens, I mean, what families do, it's so. I mean, since I'm a human rights worker, I cannot tell you the kind of torture that queer people are subjected to in their homes when they come out of the closet and say that I'm so and so, and I want treatment, and how they're hounded and how they're taken to these hospitals and given electric currents. Can you believe it's still increasingly there is an understanding, but when you run with that case into the public, there isn't too much support. And same-sex marriage was, of course, I mean, why do people want to get married? Because of handing, because of succession rights, because of guardianship, because of many other things. Being together, you want to be sharing many things which you would like to do as couples under a social framework. Now, those rights you don't get, which you can get in marriage, you don't get. That has been very unfortunate, and we don't expect this government to turn around and say that we will make the law. Okay, the Supreme Court didn't make it. We will make the law. No. So actually very, very. I mean, it's not a government at all, or the police. I mean, there is no approach of this government to ensure that people who are queer should be treated equally as humans. This government has never made a single statement towards that.
yeah, it fits into a pattern, right, of the patriarchy of this government. Another question that Sejal had is there any update on the Vinesh Phogat case?
Yeah. So I was personally involved in the restless case. I mean, this Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, you can see what a hoax and hollow symbol. Imagine, in we were going through all their papers. In 2010, the code of conduct rules put out by the sports ministry and the sports authority had sexual harassment of women at workplace at the core. This is 2010. It's very late because Vishakha judgment came in 1997. What were they doing 13 years? Now, in wrestling, women come into national wrestling. They come in 2011, 2012. Since then, women started going for national championship and world championship. It's since then. And this chap who was a target and today he's been granted full bail, Brijbhushan Sharan Singh, who was the Wrestling Federation president, who was a BJP member of parliament, had completely hijacked it, this entire federation. And, and it's in his house. Where is the office of the federation? It's in his house, and it'll be running from his house. And where will the trainings happen? It'll happen in his constituency. And it was just, for the women, it was so difficult. It was so difficult. So in 2023 December, when the women spoke out with Sakshi Malik and Vinesh Fogat and others, Sangeeta Fogat, taking a lead, there were that time 25 women who spoke out. By the time they met the ministry, there were fewer women and they were assured that something will happen. But nothing happens till April. That is when these women came out to protest. Now, Vinesh Fogat and Sakshi, very, very promising, wonderful women who were treated so shabbily by the state. So shabbily. I just cannot tell you, because they were dissenters. They questioned, they kept questioning till the end. We know it when the day the parliament was being inaugurated. And they said that we will march to parliament also and hold our own women's panchayat out there. We know how they were dragged onto the streets and whipped, literally, dragged, beaten, pushed, and all kinds of cases against them. This lack of acknowledgement that this exists, that the culture of sexual violence exists within a sports federation, despite Vishakha, despite the law of sexual harassment of women at workplace since 2013, despite all that, this Brijbhushan Sharan Singh had absolute impunity. And then the federation has elections, and since he cannot run the election, there's a case against him. So one of his stooges wins. And now, even internationally, not much could be done. International federations have also not intervened. It was very sad that she lost in the Olympics, but not getting into the merits of it. But there was no sort of compassion, There was no compassion. Winning and losing is part of the game. You just play the game, There was no compassion. There was no sort of holding her to the heart and saying, so what if you lost? In fact, she was told that she needs to have not eaten so much. All kinds of rubbish that senior sportswomen were saying. They were treated very badly. I think Fatima is in. There should be some questions for her. So I just feel that even today, in sports, if you do a study, how many sexual harassment committees exist? They don't. They just don't. It's very, very sad. We just did a survey recently of our Rajasthan committees. They don't exist. And even Indian Express did a survey of about 60, 80 committees out of, I don't know how many sports associations, federations. There were, except for 2 or 3, there were none. So this is the Beti Bachao angle of Narendra Modi.
Afreen, so glad you're back. We have time for one more question. There's two people who asked versions of this, and I'll put them together because I think they share the same sentiment. One is from Ronak Patel. She said, Afreen, when you said women's bodies are being used as battlegrounds, she was very moved by this. And she wanted to ask both of you, how do you both mentally keep moving forward in the work when there are so many barriers? And then another attendee also asked, is there a silver lining for Indian women? And what can those of us, particularly in the diaspora, do to um, support and encourage or push forward the cause of Indian women?
So I think if
Yeah, I
Afreen
think
should answer that. What is
yeah,
it that?
I would not be able to open my turn on my camera though. Um, so quickly, I think I'm not going to sort of romanticize. Uh, I'm not going to sort of romanticize the mental toll it takes to be a woman, especially a Muslim woman in India right now. I'm not going to. We just. I mean, I don't think we have an option to not challenge the the kind of violence that we're facing. We do not have an option. We do not have the privilege to sort of just s- not challenge the or fight Hindutva and the different kinds of violence stereotypes that is being done, politics that is being done on our behalf or on our bodies. That being said, I think the future of women's rights uh, in India is at a crossroad. On one hand, there is an aggressive, state-backed um, rollback of women's freedom, especially from minorities communities. And on the other hand, there is an unprecedented resistance. So I think there might be some silver lining. Young women are mobilizing. We're leading protests, challenging oppressive laws, and demanding our rightful space. So I think the resistance is what gives hope, definitely. I think for diaspora uh, to sort of support women in India, it would be to strengthen community-based mobilizations, such as the movements like Shaheen Bagh. That because real change actually comes from grassroots mobilization, and it's not a state handout. It does not come from established status quo. It is going to come from the grassroots. So support women who are actively mobilizing, working on ground. Um, there is a possibility. I mean, I think there's also an attack on the Indian civil society, and global platforms can amplify marginalized voices. So I think rather than solely engaging with state-backed organizations that sanitize India's gender discourse, events like this, the one that Hindus for Human Rights has organized today, are important, are crucial, and there should be more events such like these. And I think there's a tendency to separate gender justice or uh, discourse on gender justice from Islamophobia. So, as if Muslim women's oppression exists in isolation from the broader state violence, which that has to change. And I think ultimately the fight for gender justice in India is a fight against Hindutva, caste oppression, and state control. It is a fight for real autonomy, not selective empowerment dictated by the state. So I think the role of our international allies should not to be sanitize or soften this reality, but to amplify the voices of those in front lines, on the ground, working, changing, moving
Thank
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Afreen. Good reminders to remember that all of these fights are interconnected. Also giving, I think, those of us in the diaspora good orders on how to advance the cause of women in India. Kavita?
I think we are living now in a global world, so one cannot deny our role in helping each other. And increasingly, we need it because country after country is falling to this madness, to this fascism. We're seeing what's happening in the US. I don't know how much US people will be able to help us. Will they be able to help themselves? We sometimes ask around here, So, however, I think number one, we need platforms of sharing. And something like this, as Afreen said, this is a platform of sharing where we can actually, how do we construct platforms where we can dialogue with each other? Say, for instance, the whole attack on labor in our country with the new labor codes that are coming. What does it mean for women? Something that labor experts and especially the gender-based labor experts are trying to put together. Something like that needs to be shared. Or say the farmer struggle. We never talked about it. I'm so glad Afreen brought in what Shaheen Bagh meant. This whole, it's so much of strength in those women in sitting in large numbers peacefully, like a rock. Over our bodies, you'll bring in that damn CA or NRC implementation of it or whatever. Similarly, farmer women, they gave a year that time to the struggle and went back home, and many are still sitting on two borders for the last 1 year again. They started on February 14th, and it's been a year now. So I really think that we need more to listen to these voices, to get women from these struggles and to listen to them directly. I refuse to accept that these are puppets. Everybody kept telling me these women were sitting in Shaheen Bagh, the Shaheen Baghs all over the country, everywhere where the dari was spread out and women were sitting in Dharna. It was called a Shaheen Bagh. So, they said, oh, they are puppets. And I said, listen, women also have agency. Yes, the men may have arranged the transportation, the men may have arranged many other things for women to get here. It doesn't make the women puppets. Look at the discussions that women are doing. They were so good. So I just feel we need to get those. We need to get more. We have to listen, all of us, to more Adivasi women, to more Dalit women, to struggling farmers women, to Muslim women. We need to actually do it to more working class women. We need to women who go into Narega sites. What's happening because you're killing this program. Narega has practically been killed. So what will happen? How do women now envisage a future without the MGNREG at their doorstep, something that they could depend on a bit? What's happening to immigrant women? So I think if it could be bringing in, rather than women like me, we bring in more direct voices, more voices. Afreen is young and she also brings in the future of India with her when she talks, and it heartens me a lot. So if we can get, I think we'll get a lot of inspiration from such women, and I think globally. So one thing is to have these platforms of sharing, and the other thing is campaigns. We really, as Afreen said, the civil society is completely being attacked. The number of people in jail, campaigning together, which a lot of you have done, campaigning together for the release, like say Gulfisher has been in jail for so long, or Jyoti Jagtap, in the Bhima Koregaon, Gulfisha in the Delhi riots, or Sunita Pottam of the Mulvasi Bachao Manch in Bastar. 60 women have been put in, 60 men and young men and women have been put inside jail simply because they were regularly opposing the setting up of paramilitary camps in their villages. They said, we don't want it. And they know what happens and what happens to women when paramilitary camps come. There's so much of sexual violence and other kinds of violence. So, so I think we need to actually rethink of the campaigns. And lastly, I really feel we need to all think of a less violent world. And I think the women's movement has always led these discussions, has led the road to peace. But what is that road to peace? What is, I mean, not peace in the sense of peace without justice is no peace. I don't know. I don't want to make it sound passive, but at least, okay, the road to justice, to a more just world. How do you negotiate? What are tools? Our tools are tools of resistance and negotiation. How do we negotiate with somebody like Trump or Modi? How do you negotiate with them? How do you negotiate with people who just don't want to understand, who never want to meet you, never give you time? I mean, Shaheen Bagh, such a big movement, never met those women even once. So I just feel that we also need to discuss collectively, how to actually deal with this situation. That has to be done at a global level, because there is an acute climate crisis. At the same time, there's a complete attack on democracy, progressive values, ideals, a diverse society, equality. There's an attack on all this. So we need to rethink collectively. A discourse has to start again, and I think women can help each other across the globe and take the initiative.
Well, thank you, Kavita. That's a wonderful place to end. Thank you both, Afreen and Kavita, for your time. And thank you to everyone in the audience. This has been a wonderful discussion. I'm grateful to all of you for joining, and I hope we can have many more of these discussions on women's rights, both here at the CSW and in other fora as well. So thank you all.